about collagen. So I think that can be interesting. I'll have a registered dietitian joining us, Kristen. Yep. And let me get her in here, see how this goes. Like I said, guys, anyone who's joining in now, we're going to be talking collagen in your diet, kind of what it can do, how to get it. Hey, perfect.
Hey, Scott.
How are you?
Doing.
Uh-oh. Am I breaking up? Are you breaking up?
Hey,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great,
okay, you
awesome.
froze up for a minute, but...
I hit the wrong button. Yeah, user error.
Try that again. All right. Sorry, what did you say? Could you hear me fine?
Yep, I've got you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay, so... I guess to anyone who's watching, I already kind of introduced that we're going to be talking about collagen in the diet, what it does, and how we get it, and things like that. So I guess start off, if you want to introduce yourself to anyone watching.
Right. My name's Kristen Koskinen. I'm a registered dietitian. I live in Washington State, but thanks to telehealth, I'm able to see clients around the country. And I work primarily with student athletes, namely dancers. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then quick overview. Scott, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. Started in rehab for recovering dancers. I work almost exclusively with dancers, and now shifting in more to the performance side of things, making sure you are training appropriately to maximize your results. And I think in some regards, collagen will fall into that. But I know very little about this subject, which is why it was interesting. So we are going to, it's going to be fun to interview Kristen and kind of learn some of the things about it.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because it came across my plate. There was some recent research that came out of the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and that's when I actually stumbled upon this. And the research is really new. It came out in 2017. And so by the time it gets to, all of us and through the sports medicine and sports nutrition funnels, that's where I started looking deeper into this whole collagen thing.
Okay, so relatively new, all things considered.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is. We've got the history of it, and the research with the collagen goes way back. But we definitely have some new research coming in that that reinforces what we might want to do specifically in the dance world and how it can serve our dancers, because we do see a lot of injuries that we'd like to prevent, as well as if you dance long enough. I've seen statistics, I don't know how true they are, something like for every 1,000 hours, you're going to have 4 injuries or something. But we do know if you dance long enough, you will sustain an injury. So how can we prevent that, offset that, and recover optimally?
Awesome. Okay, that's a great intro, and to find out how collagen can play a role in that. So I guess the first thing I'd be interested in hearing is a little bit of kind of, what is collagen's role in the body? Like, what does collagen do for us?
Yeah, so collagen is one of the most prevalent proteins in our body. It actually makes up 80% of our connective tissue, like tendon, ligament, cartilage, those kinds of things. And it's 30% of our bone tissue. And people don't really think about that with bone. I think a lot of times they think about bone as just being a stick and hard minerals, but it's this matrix of collagen that is the starting point for it. And so that's where it's kind of important. And beyond that, it's part of all of our vessels, our intestines. It's really a prevalent protein.
Yeah, and on the kind of rehab side of things, you mentioned 2 things that are very big, I think, that I see working with dancers. One, tendons, which are a lot of collagen. And in your common tendinopathies, we're usually having collagen disorganization, things like that.
Yeah.
And then in bones, which we're having stress fractures, which I feel like recently I've actually been seeing a little bit more, regardless if that trend is global or not. But
yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of stress fractures, and we're seeing them in younger and younger athletes. And when I say athletes, I really think it's always important to emphasize that dancers are athletes. They're artists and they're athletes. And in terms of your perspective and mine too, I treat them as athletes in terms of my intervention approaches. So and we're seeing that in younger kids across the board. So, and it's, something we definitely want to jump on early. I mean, in terms of prevention, which, we can call prehab too.
Exactly, yeah. I think the athlete thing is one thing I connect with a lot. I try to use the term artistic athlete almost like exclusively when I'm talking about dancers or performing artists. So 100%. So collagen, to recap, is one of the most prevalent. It's throughout our body.
Right.
And then, so it obviously plays a role because it's so prevalent in our body.
Yeah.
Where do you naturally find collagen, for ingestion, for your diet?
Sure. So traditional sources, it hasn't always been a hard thing to get in our diet, but collagen comes from animal sources. So it comes from skin and cartilage and tendons and bones. And a traditional diet included people eating animals from snout to tail. Food was hard to come by historically. It hasn't been easy like it is now. And now our diet issues are kind of the reverse, where people get too much and it's too refined. But in a traditional diet where it took a lot of energy to either hunt an animal or to raise it before you slaughtered it, all parts were used. And so traditional foods like oxtail soup and eating organ meats and head cheese and skin were easy or common sources of collagen. Our diet isn't like that anymore, and especially since about the 80s when the low-fat trend really took effect. We started, as a culture, started eliminating a lot of these foods from our diet. So the boneless, skinless chicken breast, right? I mean, that seems to be the basis for many what we'll call clean diets. And so if you or your parents spent any time in the 80s, chances are you don't eat food that has skin on it. Like the idea of eating salmon with the skin makes a lot of people a little queasy. And so, reintroducing these traditional foods is a bit of a challenge. Not a lot of people eat organ meats. It's becoming, the funny thing is that's what we consider poor food and peasant food. And those you're only really seeing in maybe high-end restaurants bringing that back. So if you don't eat skin or bone broth or any of these animal products regularly, you probably aren't getting enough collagen.
Okay. So the primary, which I didn't even think of, organ meat.
Yeah.
Is a high source of collagen.
Yeah.
And in a normal, I'm even thinking where would I find organ meat in the store? What's a common, I don't know, for someone who doesn't eat organ meat at all, what would be something if someone wanted to try something like that?
Sure.
Do you have any idea?
Yeah, stomach, kidney, liver, intestines.
Liver makes sense. Is this available in your normal grocery store, or do you need to go to a specialty place to find this?
You can get it at your butcher for sure. And and anytime you're eating an organ meat, because they concentrate whatever the animal eats, we definitely want to be really particular about what we're getting. Getting organ meats from chickens is pretty easy. From larger animals, you can also ask the butcher at your local market.
Skin of fish is something I thought of, skin on chicken and other meat, but I never thought on fish because I've always associated scales with that's what you cut off.
Yeah.
So some do eat that.
For sure. Like salmon skin is definitely, and it can be, as part of what we want to do is sometimes bridging into these things can be a little hard. So if you go to a sushi place, sometimes there's sushi rolls. I don't know how much they really are, but they make it crispy. And so
I had a connection issue. Scottish dancer. I'm going to get to that question right after this. Let me see if I can get her back on. And if anyone else has any other questions, kind of what we've been going over, real quick recap if anyone's just joining. Collagen in the diet, what it does, and where to get it. And we're going to go into some of the more areas like that. So let's see. I think this. So we were talking while she's joining in collagen. Skin of meat is one of them. And welcome back.
Hey, thanks.
We expected technical issues, so I'm glad we had one. Maybe we'll get it out of the system.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you were just saying crispy sushi. I know you didn't.
Yeah. So if you crisp the skin of an animal up, it tends to be more palatable, and it's definitely an easier transition. But we are so far away from skin on any of our food that even chicken nuggets have the skin removed. So it's kind of interesting. And it doesn't have to be something where it's like, fried and trans fat and that kind of thing. I use an air fryer to fry chicken, and it's outstanding. So there are different ways you can use it.
I've made homemade chicken nuggets, but we always start with boneless, skinless chicken breasts. That's kind of our go-to, or tenderloins maybe, but they're still skinless. That's all we get. So.
Yeah, and the natural source, something that would be easy for people is if you make a roast or roasted chicken, that gelatinous bottom in the pan that you see, that is a natural source of collagen. And when you're eating meats, if you're eating meats, sorry for the background.
Oh, no worries.
Get that, please, yeah. And so and when you cook the bone also presents some of its collagen into the meat you're eating, into any sauce drippings and things like that. So cooking meat on the bone is definitely helpful.
Awesome. Okay, so some great sources we have. If we're trying to get it, some organ meat, which we listed a few options, fish skin, chicken skin things, and then the bone, cooking with the bone, let it absorb.
Bone
we have one question.
Yep.
Yes.
And bone broth too, that's an easy one. Yeah. Okay, question.
Good. Yeah, well, and something I think we're intending to go to, but we have Scottish adult ballet dancer, and welcome. She's asking, she's a vegan, so what would she look for?
Well, collagen is solely an animal product, and so there are no vegan sources. However, there is some research coming up about having bacteria produce a collagen substance. It's not readily available. I don't even know if it's out of the lab yet. It's on the way. Your best bet is to try and get the amino acids that is to eat plenty of protein. So you'll need to eat a lot of complete proteins. You can eat a well-sourced soy, quinoa, making sure that you're getting a full complement of amino acids in your food consistently.
And then, do you recommend, this is just because I've worked with some vegetarians, and for a while this sounds very pathetic to anyone who's actually vegan, but I did meatless Mondays, which is just you don't eat meat for the one day, but seitan, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that right, but basically seitan, it's the protein from gluten. Is that, I never dug into that. I know it's a high source of protein. Is that something you'd recommend as well, or it's not going to be in the same way?
I think any kind of grain, I think with seitan, it ends up getting a really high concentration of gluten that maybe irritate your GI tract, and a lot of people are having some issues with gluten. So I'd probably stick more with whole beans and whole grains and things like whole food products rather than trying to isolate.
Okay. And then to wrap up on that, on a vegan, so if they were trying to get collagen naturally, they're going to get the amino acids, and then your body will produce it, right?
And then your body will produce it, right? So your body makes collagen. We make our own collagen. The issue becomes, do we have enough resources for it? And you also need vitamin C in order to manufacture the vitamin C and get the cross-linking you need. So if you remember hearing about scurvy as a kid in school, maybe the English sailors who went out and didn't have citrus fruit and then they developed scurvy, this is part of why that is. So when you're getting those amino acids, you also need other nutrients to come in to build the collagen. The problem sometimes comes, and we see this in dancers, is we can make these things, but when we're under stress or strain or working out a lot or have an injury or get sick or have a surgery or aren't eating well enough, we don't have enough of these building block components to manufacture our own collagen. And so you can get behind that way without even looking to augment, but you could just get behind. And it's really important to note that it's not just the collagen, but it's these other players that come in that are part of we call them cofactors, and they have the enzymes that accelerate the process, to keep things simple. And vitamin C is mandatory. Vitamin A, copper, zinc are all part of this process. So if we try and isolate it out and say it's just collagen, we're going to miss a lot of things. Which is why
especially for
whole foods.
Yeah, and what you're saying is, I mean, the main part, if we're not getting, even for people who do eat meat, if we're having trouble adding that in, a really well-balanced diet, you should be able to produce enough, considering if you're recovering appropriately. In all areas of recovery, whether it's sleep, stress management, load management, or training technique, things like that.
Yeah. And as a dancer, you're going to have additional demands on your body that might make it conditionally necessary, that in a normal circumstance you wouldn't need it, but in other circumstances you may benefit from bringing some extra collagen in or augmenting in other ways.
And I think this circles back, and I think it also circles back to any vegans or vegetarians, is that as an athlete, our demands are much higher. I think in the fitness world, protein is kind of maybe blown out of proportion. What would be, we now think of protein so high.
Yeah.
For the normal person, you might not need that much. But for an athlete, there definitely is still considerable need for all types of your performance and health. And I don't want to go down the protein track, but just saying that there is more importance to protein than just collagen production as well, right?
Right, and it is important. And one of the things that we see lacking in dancers, and that's not unusual, is they may be protein deficient. And if you're protein deficient, this is one of those things where it pulls into you're not covering all your bases, and so you may struggle and find that you have difficulty recovering. You are going to be more prone to injury, and your injuries aren't going to recover as rapidly.
Okay, awesome. And that was the next question I was going to ask, is if we're low on collagen, what are the risks? And that, you basically summed them up there.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure. If you don't have those proteins on board, if you're not getting enough vitamin C, if you're not getting enough of the micronutrients that you need to support all these things, you're going to increase your risk of fracture. If we're talking about stress fractures, if you're not getting enough vitamin D, if you're not getting enough vitamin K2, there's a lot that goes into it. So that foundational diet is super important. If you've got your foundation set and you're doing, everything to the best of your ability, and you still want to either bring in some prehab ideas like prevention, or you do end up with an injury because it's going to happen, then collagen has been shown to help with recovery of an injury. And the kind of what the going recommendation is you take 15 to 20 grams of collagen or gelatin, or either or work with a solid source of vitamin C about an hour before training or rehab or working out, and that helps direct the collagen molecules and the vitamin C to the source of action, whether it's your bone, tendon, ligament, cartilage, wherever you're at, and so it's available like a building block to those tools. And then this is where your PT is really critical, because I can help you with the building blocks, but your PT acts as the site manager, and they make sure that stuff comes in and you're doing what you need to do to properly rebuild that connective tissue. Because do you want it to be stiff? Does it need to be long and live? Those are issues depending on your sport, depending on your performance. How's that going to work? So that's where it's important to make sure you have someone who's experienced in your field, like a dance physical therapist. Really important. Yeah. Well,
I love that analogy, but the kind of the site manager, and I think it helps support inner collaboration. I think, especially in the dance world, maybe in smaller companies and the more isolated companies, one person kind of gets all the hats and tries to do everything on their own. And it's very hard to specialize in everything. So there's a lot of holes. So I think the more we have people specialize, all right, we come in with a nutrition building block, we come in with your technique building block, we come in with your rehab, we come in with your training. Having someone kind of maybe just making sure recovery is good and mental health and all these other areas.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing, which is something I've always kind of believed, is on all levels this interplays. And you're saying, poor sleep can affect your production and how you're converting your amino acids into collagen increasing its risk of injury. Poor sleep has other factors like fatigue that increase your risk of injury. So it's all compounded.
Totally. And here's something that people, I think, find interesting too. So if you don't get your stress managed, you're going to have a hard time recovering. And in part because building cortisol requires a lot of vitamin C. So now your body, by demand, is going to produce stress hormones because that's your fight or flight. And that's survival. So it will direct, right? It's going to change that pathway. So now if you're under a lot of stress and you're burning through vitamin C, it's not available. And you
so you're using up your nutrients to make a stress hormone, which comes with quite a bit of negative consequences. But the other one is you don't have those supplements or those nutrients to do what it needs to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it really is. It's like, it's not just an issue of, if you calm, it's so complicated, but some of the things it can be really simple too. Like if you're not sleeping enough, my results are going to be limited that I can help you with. Scott's results are going to be limited because we just can't do it. That's why PTs call me is they say, hey, I can't get beyond my results with them because their nutrition's out of whack. And so that's where I come in. Often my calls come from the physical therapist. So
interesting.
I've got a referral because I'm at a stopping point.
I won't go down this track because I want to keep moving here. But just a fun aside, which I didn't really think of, going further, which I think I'll now be more open to this. But I had a recent ACL tear repair that I was working with in rehab, and her diet was atrocious. I mean, she literally some days would see me at 6 p.m, and all she had was an extra large Dunkin' Donuts coffee and a donut. I'd be like, what? And then for dinner, she sometimes ate, sometimes didn't, but she'd get 1,000 calories from her drink.
Yeah.
And then a donut. And her recovery was so slow, and she was a hard worker. And I kept saying, I wasn't giving as much, it's not my field, but I was like, let's just start working on adding vegetables, adding a protein source. And it was kind of a saying I use a lot, is eat the rainbow, eat different color vegetables and add some sources of protein. And that's step one.
Yeah. And here's the thing. So you're trying to do your work and get that ACL, which tends to be more prominent in females. Estrogen drives that a lot. That's why we see injuries in ACL in women more, and we see differences in hamstring. We don't see groin pulls. That's more of a guy thing, right? That's back to that hormone stuff. So when you're trying to recover, guess what? Sugar can come in and fill in the blanks in that collagen. But when it does so, it's not organized. We can't control that very well. So you end up with your recovery is going to be slow, and it's not going to be good. It's one of the reasons, when you see with diabetics, slow recovery, right?
Yes,
it's all that sugar.
We do.
So your sugar intake can really, I'm not trying to be a downer. I just want you to be able to dance for a long time. So
yes, exactly.
Managing that is a big thing. And if you're taking sugar in place of some of these other building blocks and food sources, there's not, you're cutting yourself off.
And I feel like we could go down the even general nutrition advice. We could go way down that, both of us. But if we wanted to, before we talk a little bit more about the specifics of supplements and maybe what they should look for, because we've done a really good job on food sources and stuff. If we give a few general recommendations, so if someone is, because you mentioned there's a lot of nutrients that play into it. So if you had a few things to improve collagen formation with the purpose of hopefully decreasing injury rates, specifically to bone, ligaments, tendons, and other things. I know collagen plays a part in many parts of the body, but some general recommendations. One was, and then you can fill in the blank, I'm just trying to summarize. Add skin, add to fish or meats.
Yep.
Add organs.
Bone broth.
Animal organs if you're comfortable doing that.
Yep.
And then what would you say are a few other just general, hey, let's maximize your collagen formation? What would be some other ones?
I think the easiest thing and the most palatable for most people is gelatin. And in the research, gelatin is used. So gelatin is basically collagen. I mean, that's what it is. It's formulated. Yeah. So if you make Jell-O, I don't recommend using the Jell-O that comes with sugar and dyes, but you can buy Knox gelatin, there's some really good brands that are concerned about sourcing. And you mix that about 3 tablespoons with a couple cups of juice. I don't know, I've got a recipe. If people are interested, message me.
Okay.
I'll send you a recipe. Or take some gummies, which you can also make. I've got a recipe where it's part collagen, part gelatin, and then I fill in the blanks with orange juice concentrate, because remember, we've got to have the vitamin C with it. And we can go back to that article. And so you take that about an hour before your training, hour to 30 minutes before your training, to absorb, digest and absorb, and you can do that regularly. If you're, you seriously, you can take it as a snack. It's easy. Other things you can do, you can add a little bit of gelatin to soups. It'll just thicken it as long as you keep it warm. If you cool it, it's going to get solid, and you might not like that. You can add a little bit to smoothies. And really, gelatin is a food product. It's a processed food product.
Okay.
It's not anything that needs to be regulated. Hydrolyzed collagen is basically taking that gelatin and processing it with enzymes to break it down so that in cold fluid, it stays liquid. That's about all it is. But it all comes from animal sources, and it just makes it easy.
Awesome. And then I think one key point, just because I know a few people don't, is nutrient timing as well. You said that plays a part. So ideally take it within an hour of your hard work, whether that's training, rehab, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have another question here, and then I think we'll wrap up. But this is going, I think, kind of on near our final question too.
Sure.
Is what about like when we're looking at like the containers, like collagen powders and those kind of supplements? Would you recommend those, or sticking towards the other things you've mentioned already?
Well, I think if we can get it from a baseline diet, that's always ideal. Food first, always, and that's going to be that should be your foundation. However, then there's life, and we don't always get that. And what's ideal isn't what always happens. So if you don't have time to, a lot of people, especially the answers, don't have time to cook that way. It's great, but it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's expensive. Collagen supplements can be great. The powdered forms tend to be less expensive. You can make your own bone broth. I mean, that would kind of do it. But I'm fine with using the powders. Gelatin tends to be less expensive than collagen, and you want to be careful of your sourcing. So some brands that are typically recognized as watching their sourcing, and what I mean by that is how are the animals raised? Because anytime you take an animal product, everything that animal has eaten or been exposed to is concentrated in its flesh, in its bones, whatever. So with your food, you are what your food eats in this situation. So we want to be careful with that. Vital proteins, I use Vital Proteins. Further Food, I use Further Food. I use their gelatin. Great Lakes are 3 kind of
awesome
top brands that you can look at. You can also get them in capsules, and if you want to take a capsule, that's fine. Just make sure when you take it that you have a decent source of vitamin C on board, and by that I mean about 60 milligrams.
And that's nutrient timing as well. We need to have that around the same time we're ingesting?
Sure. So if you want to stir the collagen into your coffee and then have an orange on the side, that's fine. If you want to stir it into your orange juice, that's fine.
Awesome. Great. Well, this has been very interesting to me, and it's something I heard a little bit about and never dug into. So I think the way it plays into recovery, especially I deal with a lot of stress fractures, tendon issues, things like that. So I think that's very helpful. Do you have any closing comments on collagen or how we intake it?
No, not really. If anyone has any questions, you can find me on Instagram, Kristen RDN. Send me a message, and if you send me a message, I'll send you the recipes.
And as we kind of talked about, there are a lot of other things that play in. And if you're really trying to maximize your results, or if you've had some issues, you're available, right, for anyone in the nation, or can call you and have a consultation to really dig into the rest of their nutrient health.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. And then I will just close off. If the nutrient is on board, you've got your mental health in check, and you've got your sleep, and now you're looking to up your performance in a physical training, cross training, or recovery, that's where I'm available, and I do remote training for that as well. So awesome. I love doing this. I hope we get to do it again down the road. And I guess that's it.
Yeah. Hey, great. Hey, thanks for having me on, Scott. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.